think we're all set to go. I'll call on Andy to present the sky this month.
Okay, thank you. It's fun to be back again. Nothing happens this month. I just made up a bunch of lies to entertain you for a few minutes. People who have seen my talks before probably recognize the agenda. It's the same as always. Big picture, planetary highlights, lunar highlights, not emission nebula. No, I did something different this time. Comets and meteors, a variable star. There you go, Frank. And a double star, and whatever spaceflight highlights I've been able to scare up out on the internet. So starting with the big picture, this is what our sky looks like this evening, assuming it would be clear, which it isn't. I notice a distinct lack of planets. If you can get way down here, there's a Mars just off the edge of the viewpoint there, but it's a lousy view. We do have our nice spring constellations, Bootes, Virgo, Coma Berenices, and all the great stuff that you'll find in around there. Jupiter is just going to be rising once it gets really dark, and Ceres is right there if you're collecting your minor planets. It's more interesting when we get later in this month, getting towards mid to late June. When you get up early in the morning, there are actually some things to see. This is the last night before the next meeting. The moon is just about full, passing right by Saturn and Pluto, right down in Sagittarius. That's probably some kind of good photo opportunity there. Jupiter just off to the right there. Neptune is well up in the sky. And we're looking at all of our best summer Milky Way constellations, Sagittarius, Aquila, Vulpecula, Cygnus, and all the way up. So this would be a good time to get out your telescopes and look for all the fun stuff. The catch, of course, is the nights are getting short. We're coming up on the summer solstice. Tonight, twilight ends at 10:45 and starts again at 3:10 in the morning. By the time we get to the next meeting, we're looking at almost 11:30 before twilight ends, and it starts again at 2:40. So this is bad news for anybody doing any big astrophotography projects. You're only going to get a few hours of dark observing. And actually, it's lousy for everybody who wants to do some observing, especially if you have a day job and you need to get up in the morning. So the important dates, the new moon on June 3rd, moon at apogee on May 7th, perigee on apogee on May 26th, perigee on June 7th. I always recommend this. It's an interesting project to take pictures of the moon at these two dates and compare the sizes and see just how elliptical the moon's orbit is. It's a fun science project if anybody has kids or nephews or nieces who are looking for something. June 10th, Jupiter at opposition. That's going to be about as good as it gets to view Jupiter. It's going to be big, it's going to be close. And as I was saying before, for you photographers, a moon and Saturn passing very close to each other on June 19th. So the moon, the new moon on June 3rd, which is good, full moon on June 17th, which is bad, unless you're working on one of the lunar observing certificates, which I hope everybody here is or has already completed theirs. We have to make something of those moony nights when we can't see any of the good stuff. Lunar X is on June 11th. Since we don't have anybody new here, I don't have to explain what the Lunar X is. There's the picture that comes along every month. You've all seen it. So on to planets. Mercury is just past superior conjunction. Later in June, it'll be appearing in the evening and should be a reasonably good target if you have a decent horizon and the sky is reasonably still. Venus just barely trickles up above the sun in the morning sky. It's going to be a lousy target for the next month. It may as well not be there. Mars is sinking into evening twilight. It's going to be a lousy target. It's really far away. It's not much bigger than Neptune or Jupiter is, or Neptune or Uranus is in the telescope. It's that far away. So I wouldn't bother spending a lot of time looking for that. In the morning, assuming we're the kind of people who get up early in the morning, we've got a decent set of planets then, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. It's a really good time for looking at Saturn. The rings are wide open. I don't think it's near its maximum yet, but it's going to be quite spectacular for anybody who's out there looking. The good news is they'll stay open throughout the summer, so if you don't feel like getting up at 3 in the morning to see Saturn, you can wait a couple months and get a better look. Same geometry sometime later in the summer, July or August. You're not going to see any real detail on either of the ice giants, Uranus or Neptune. They aren't very close. They aren't very high in the sky, so they're not really optimally placed to observe this month. Saturn doesn't get very high above the southern horizon for us either, so it's not going to be outstanding for photography or looking for any details in the weather patterns, but the rings are going to look good. Now, what I don't have here is planetary highlights for the evening planets, and that's because the evening planets are basically no good this month. We'll get Jupiter showing up after midnight, and you can just see Mars trickling over the edge of the horizon, not much after the sun sets, so we'll just give the evening a rest as far as planet hunting. The spectacular show is going to be late at night and into the early morning. Jupiter is just fantastic right now. It's big and it's bright, and anybody up around midnight or later, it's going to be pretty obvious where it is and what it is in the sky. Now, just yesterday, I was going through the Rascals mailing list, and somebody brought up the question of whether the Great Red Spot is unraveling. Some people have apparently reported streamers of red material trailing away from it. And some people are speculating that after 5 centuries or so, the storm is finally coming apart. Now, that having been said, 2 years ago, people were saying that the storm was fading and shrinking and disappearing, and it's still there, so don't make too much out of the speculation. But if you're out observing and you get a chance to look for the red spot, especially if you get to take pictures, because this is, if it is unraveling, this will be seriously scientifically interesting, then, you know, go and have a look for it. About an hour after Jupiter rises, Saturn comes up, and everybody loves Saturn. The thing about Saturn is it's a really great target to show for kids and people who don't really know much about astronomy. Unfortunately, kids and people who don't know much about astronomy aren't going to be out wandering around at 2 a.m. looking through your telescope. Pluto is still in Sagittarius, and that's going to make it a tough target. It's 14th magnitude or so, and there's 1 million stars there. If you're going to go Pluto hunting, I would probably do it with a camera rather than the eyepiece. Then you can take a shot one day and a week later and try looking for movement rather than actually trying to spot the correct tiny dot in your eyepiece. Coming into Ophiuchus ahead of Jupiter is Ceres, the other minor planet. It's not particularly interesting to look at, but it's interesting to put it on your list and say, yes, I've seen minor planets. And it's a fairly fast mover compared to the outer planets, so it's a fun thing to track from night to night or week to week. So I do like to do some deep sky stuff. I'm guessing everybody here is working on their Messier certificate or their finest NGC or even the Hubble 400. And if you are, there's probably swarms of galaxies that you've got to track down, and a lot of them are ones that show up in the big spring star clusters, the Virgo cluster and the Coma cluster. The Virgo cluster is the better one for showing off to people. We get Mercurian's chain in the middle of it, which is a nice string of big bright galaxies, and makes a pretty spectacular show for anybody you want to impress with your telescope. The Coma cluster, further away, the galaxies aren't as bright in the eyepiece, but it's still all very interesting. The showpiece in the Virgo cluster is obviously M87. I'm pretty sure it's the brightest elliptical galaxy. I wrote that down and I was certain about it, and now I'm thinking about it. I'm wondering if there are others. But it's the most prominent member of the Virgo cluster. You can almost see it with binoculars on a good night right from downtown Toronto. And of course, it's been in the news recently. It's they got the amazing image of the event horizon at the black hole in the center. The whole thing is way beyond anything any of us are ever going to see through a telescope. But the fact that it's there is something that you can look for and talk about. Something that is within our range, in theory, is the relativistic jet, the stream of material blasting out of the black hole. See, there's M87. This is the Hubble Space Telescope at work, and we get this jet of material being blasted out of the center of the galaxy by the black hole, and coming out more or less at the speed of light. I'm sure there are people in this room with a telescope capable of taking a picture of that jet. Actually, has anybody actually tried taking a picture of the jet and succeeded? Not among this crowd, okay, but I'm sure you could. It's not too far beyond the realm of possibility. Now, it's a really interesting project, and this is something you're not going to do in Toronto. There have been, I don't know, probably a dozen people who have actually seen the jet themselves with their own eyeballs through the eyepiece. You need a huge telescope. You need impeccable viewing conditions. You need to keep your optics super clean, but it can be done, and it has been reported by reliable observers. So, if you want to put that on your checklist, you can always look for it anyway. Now, none of us are going to be seeing this. This is the black hole at the center of M87, or at least the event horizon. And that event horizon around the middle, the dark part, is about the size of our solar system, that order of magnitude, which gives you an idea of just what amazing detail we're seeing in the heart of another galaxy. You and I aren't going to see that through our telescopes, but the fact that it's there is really super impressive. So for Comets and Meteors this month, the only meteor shower of any note, we're going to see the tail end of the Eta Aquariids. It's leftover debris from Halley's Comet. There are a couple of minor meteor showers, the Tau Herculids and the June Mu Cassiopeids. Those we're looking at maybe 1 or 2 meteors an hour. The source I was looking at was saying that most observers can't tell these showers from random background meteors. But if you do see meteors in that time frame and feel inclined to track them back to their point of origin, you might find that you have seen meteors from these weird and little-known showers. Comets. No comets showing up brighter than 12th magnitude in any of the searches I've been able to do. Deeper than that, yeah, there's a few, but I'm not sure any of us would be interested in looking for them, which would probably make it a good time to go out and search for new comets. If you happen to be anywhere with a decent western horizon in the evening or eastern horizon in the morning, Comets are still being discovered by amateurs, not as fast as the space observed ones, but they can be done, and it will make an observing project worth trying if you've got the time and the equipment. Now, obviously, we can't go through a month without a variable star. Our Lyrae is the one I've picked for this month. It's the prototype of the entire RR Lyrae class. In Lyrae, it varies between 7.2 and 8 magnitude. It's about 13.6 hours period. What that means is it's changing fast enough that visual observations don't really capture enough detail. If you're going to go observing this one and collect serious data, the best way to do it is with a photometer or some kind of camera that you can use to get one specific wavelength and compare that to the comparison stars at a very specific time. I mean, you can look at it through the telescope and just eyeball it, but the data you get is going to be considerably less useful than more precise data. What we're basically looking at is a star that's gone past the red giant phase. It's burning helium, and it gets into a state where it pulses at a period related to the mass. Now, what that means, since we can measure the period, we know we can calculate its mass. Once we know its mass, we can calculate its absolute brightness, and we know how far away it's going to be. So this is what we call a standard candle for measuring distances to globular clusters. And Toronto's own Helen Sawyer-Hogg up at the David Dunlap Observatory more or less made a career, or at least established her career measuring these RR Lyrae variable stars in the middle of globular clusters. There's a decent collection of globular clusters around us, so anybody who's interested in taking photos of them and doing very careful comparison of the brightness of some of the bluish stars, it's a thing that can be done with relatively modest equipment nowadays. I didn't see Blake here tonight, but of course I've thrown in a double star for him. Alpha Scorpius, aka Antares. I like this one because not only is it a double star, but it's also a variable star, going from 0.6 to 1.6 over a long period of time. It's not a fast varying star, but it also has a 5.9 magnitude companion. The catch is it's very close, so it's going to be very difficult to see. There are two ways you're going to be able to see it. Directly with a 6-inch or greater telescope. Even then, it's going to take care, clean optics, careful collimation to make sure the images are nice and sharp and you don't smear out over the bright star over top of the dim star. The other interesting way is unfortunately not happening in the immediate future, occultations by the moon. Since Antares is very close to the ecliptic, every now and then the moon will pass right over top of it from our point of view. And when it does, you can see when the bright star disappears, there's still a dim star left behind. Or depending on the orientation, the other way around, the dim star will appear first and then followed by the bright star. I haven't managed myself to be able to split it. I have an 8-inch telescope, but I got to say observing conditions from where I am are pretty lousy looking to the south, and the turbulence in the sky from Greater Toronto has just messed up every attempt I've made to observe it. So I'd be curious to know if anybody manages to actually see the thing directly without using the occultation method. Spaceflight is pretty quiet this month. One Falcon 9 with 60 microsatellites is going up on May 23rd. We get the usual ISS passes late every night. Heavensabove.com is your source for times and locations. I've stolen an event from somebody in the next month and reported that Light Sail 2 is launching on a Falcon Heavy on June 22nd, or at least that's the schedule. Light Sail 2 is an attempt to launch a small satellite that will unfurl a solar sail that will power its motion around the Earth. I'm guessing at since it's being launched from Florida and probably isn't going to go too high, we probably won't be able to see it here, but one never knows. Keep an eye out for it. If it launches, maybe we'll be able to see it from here. If it is a solar sail, it should be pretty bright. So that's what's up this month, and I know what you're all saying. It's always cloudy. What if it's cloudy? Then I've dug up a website called zooniverse.org, and what it is a clearinghouse for citizen science projects, a place where scientists who have a lot of grunt work that needs to be done on their projects, things like identifying galaxy shapes or tracking variable star behavior, can go out to the wide world, and people like us who are interested in contributing to science but don't actually have jobs in science can step in and do some of the grunt work. Some of the current projects I was looking at this afternoon, identifying features on the surface of Mars, identifying features in extragalactic star clusters, exoplanets around other stars, and many, many more. So if you're like me and you're frustrated by the continuous cloud we're seeing, there is an outlet for you to do some astronomy in another way. And that's what we've got. Are there any questions? Okay. Yeah. Sorry? Any sun activity? Sun activity, I don't know about. The sun activity we usually get are things like solar flares and prominences and interesting sunspots, and they're much harder to predict. These are things that I can look in my astronomy software and say, 3 weeks from now this planet's going to be here, but I don't really have any idea what's going to be going on the sun in 3 weeks. Anything else?
Blake is online, and he does mention that the jet in M87 has been imaged through the GBO at
really?
the Carr Observatory. And he mentioned that Ian Williban has done it as well. And then also with the Alpha Scorpius, he mentioned that he has not been able to split it in an 8-inch, 11-inch, or a 12.5-inch.
Okay, so, all right. Thanks very much, Blake. Anyway, so there you know, the jet in M87 is a viable target for everybody who's willing to travel up to the observatory.
So speaking of Antares, when I was young and I had a 60-millimeter telescope, I was trying to split stars, and I thought, I can probably do this. It's a red and got a green companion. So I pulled out my telescope Barlow just to get the magnification up, and sure enough, there was a beautiful red and green. It was beautiful. Then I rotated the Barlow, and the whole system rotated.
Yeah, that sounds like my first telescope experiences too, yeah. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.